Okay, what's the next topic?
Geopolitics.
Okay.
Stefan.
Let's start. So you've had what's called the unipolar moment. So since the fall of the Soviet Union, America's kind of run the world for the last 30 years. And then people are arguing that the unipolar moment is over. And the unipolar moment was all about kind of American-dominated international institutions or kind of local institutions for specific geographic regions. So whether it's the United Nations, the World Bank, World Trade Organization, or say NATO for Europe, they were just ways of America projecting power.
Legitimizing it.
Well, projecting power, and also it's like a power multiplier. So it can take its power, but then through these multilateral institutions, they act as a multiplier in terms of the influence and control that they can have over other countries.
Right.
Now, with, I think, the rise of China, and obviously the rebuff happening with Russia and NATO over Ukraine, I think suddenly people are thinking, well, actually, maybe the unipolar moment of kind of American dominance is over. So I guess the argument for that would be the kind of the multilateral institution model that America had in place hasn't been able to, at least at this stage, force Russia to capitulate. So if you look at the strategy in Ukraine, bring Ukraine into these multilateral organizations that America controls, and then use it arguably to destabilize Russia, and then bring Russia back into these multilateral organizations that it kind of was in the Yeltsin days, with the oligarchs that got kicked out by Putin. But then that kind of hasn't really worked out. So one is it's shown the complete hollowing out of the American manufacturing base, given America decided to move all its manufacturing to China. So now the Western world can't actually produce artillery shells or tanks or whatever it is in sufficient numbers to support Ukraine. Whereas Russia just kind of dusted off all the Soviet era plans, got the factories running again. Russia still pumps out twice the number of engineering graduates as America, and so suddenly people realize that you can argue the bullshit economy of white collar nonsense versus practical real world economy of building shit and having resources. Wow, it still matters. Because of the joke with economic growth and economic GDP models is, I think it's the Reserve Bank governor, Federal Reserve governor. I think when this joke came out, it was Ben Bernanke. What's his last name?
Bernanke.
Ben Bernanke, talking to I can't remember someone else, and Ben Bernanke says, "I will pay you $1,000." They're walking in the paddocks, and he's like, "I'll pay you $1,000 to eat that pile of bullshit." And the other guy's like, "Okay," and he eats it. He's like, "Here's $1,000." And they keep walking, and then the other guy's like, "I'll pay you $1,000 to eat that pile of horseshit." And then so Ben Bernanke eats it for $1,000. And then after that, it's like Ben Bernanke's like, "Well, we've both eaten shit, and we're no better off." And the other guy's like, no, we've boosted the GDP by $2,000, right? So I think what
I think there's a Peter Schiff moment in there too.
I think what it's showing is that there is still a real economy, and what America did during the unipolar moment is it outsourced the real economy to lower cost countries like, say,
Venezuela, China.
Yeah, China. And it's all like, oh no, but we still have the knowledge economy, right? And it's like, yeah, the knowledge economy is great. You've got Facebook, you've got Google, you've got international finance, but making things still matters. And so with the war in Ukraine, first they can't provide the armaments to compete, to allow the Ukrainians to compete with the Russians. But secondly, they applied financial sanctions on Russia. Cut it off all these multilateral institutions, and yet because Russia has resources, has manufacturing, has all these things, it's actually going to be growing. Well, their GDP is either growing or shrinking slower than most of the Western world right now. So it's like boom, okay, suddenly this whole system of control hasn't worked. Then the second case is China, because the whole point before Ukraine kind of got in the way was that America was going to pivot to a China containment policy, which is you have the island containment strategy. So you have from South Korea to Japan, down the island chain that Japan controls to the Philippines, and then down to Vietnam, where they're busy trying to, it shows you democracy doesn't really matter because they're trying to reestablish a strong alliance with the Vietnamese, who they were fighting and are a communist country.
That part of that containment strategy was to have Russia on the side of the Americans.
Yeah. So the whole point was to flip Russia. So look, it was a poker move, right? It's like, okay, Putin, we can either try and Putin's like, you can negotiate, and they're like, no, we're just going to flip Russia to our side. We're going to flip them through. The whole point was Ukraine war starts, Russia starts falling apart, coup in Russia, flip Russia to the West, right? It's just that poker play didn't pay off. The whole point was, yes, to have Russia also as part of this containment strategy. So that's the first chink in the armor. The second chink is obviously the Belt and Road Initiative, because Belt and Road, the American China containment strategy is based around control of sea lanes. And so what it can do is it can have its naval fleet controlling the entire Chinese coast. So Belt and Road, which is why America was getting so scared, is all about building infrastructure through the Eurasian heartland, which can bypass American control of sea lanes. That does have its roadblocks, like with destabilization of Afghanistan, problems in Pakistan. There's other conflicts, say between Iran and Saudi Arabia or whatever, but it is progressing. Like China is rolling out kind of more infrastructure for connecting Africa, especially to China, which is what China sees as strategic to its long-term growth. Like it sees Africa both as a consumer base and as a resource pool. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think ideologically, America's been challenged because it was the land of the free. It was, you can make it, capitalism, great, all that. But now, America doesn't make much anymore, other than spending a huge amount of its money on health and the military-industrial complex, where it gets a very inefficient deal. Like there's massive amounts of wastage. The Chinese are making things. The Chinese are building massive amounts of railway lines, in manufacturing, robotics, all of this. So if you're in Africa and you're comparing the two systems and you're like, okay, the Chinese have had this kind of communist system based on 5-year plans, based on trying to bring people out of poverty, grow infrastructure, grow education, versus America, which has a two-party democracy, which is stratified wealth into really enriched elite and a whole lot of destitute poor. Which one are they going to pick? America's losing the ideological war. And then I think the last thing is just pure manufacturing. Like the Chinese are building things, doing things, whereas America and most of the West became obsessed with this white collar bureaucracy, which consumes a large amount of GDP. So either you're in government or you're in a large corporation or you're in a consulting company which is taking the money off the governments and the corporations. But most of it is just PowerPoints and documents and nonsense, right?
Crumbling infrastructure as well.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, that's amazing. That is a fantastic... now, who's going to rebut that?
Me, I'll do it. Well, not exactly, but I was going to say... part of what we should have done to avoid some of that is to get rid of our dependence on oil and other energy sources, which makes a lot of the energy politics largely obsolete. So, for instance, you've heard of peak oil and also the arguments over in the Middle East. Well, we still need oil, obviously, for manufacturing things like pharmaceuticals and plastics and all sorts of stuff that we need to. But we certainly don't need it for cars and trucks and stuff, which we can electrify or turn into gas hydrogen. We can do lots of things to actually reduce some of that dependence. That then removes some of the power from some of those hostile countries, because oil at the moment is pretty much what the world hangs on.
But okay, rebuttal to that is China doesn't have a huge amount of oil, but it's building things. So I don't think it's oil that's holding us back.
Oh, no, but we've got, well, not just China. We're talking about geopolitics, right? Not just there. So you've got all the Middle East. You've got Russia. You've got all this other stuff. They're trying to trade gas for the Nord Stream pipelines and all sorts of stuff. A lot of the issues in the Middle East were caused by basically future pipelines which were going to be built. You can not eliminate this because obviously we don't have the infrastructure actually to electrify everything just yet. But if you went into renewable energy much faster, then you can reduce some of the dependence on those things. And of course, the leverage that those hostile corporations have or companies have and countries have is lessened, right? And we don't have that at the moment, right? So we are being penalised in Australia by our dependence on oil at the moment. Petrol's very expensive. We don't have much supply, right? We don't have many reserves in case of any disaster. I think
we have oil shale.
Huh?
We have oil shale.
We don't have any refineries in Australia, except for avgas. We got avgas refineries. We can make that, but we don't have anything to make petrol.
Don't we have a lot of tar sand in oil shale? We just don't mine it because it's hard.
Well, it doesn't matter if we had it anyway, because we have no refineries, right? It's not that we don't have oil in Australia. It's just the fact that we don't have any refineries in Australia. You can't manufacture fuel from it.
So it's not that we don't have it. We just couldn't be bothered doing it.
Well, we ship a lot of our energy offshore. I think 95% of all the gas that we manufacture in Australia is sold for the export market.
Yeah, we
And we
export
give
coal
our
and we
iron
import
to
steel.
China.
Yeah, and also we don't actually get much royalties from it. So Qatar,
Raw material, yeah.
yeah, Qatar was getting, I think the figure about 2 years ago was Qatar gets $30 billion a year on the gas that they export. We export twice as much as them, and we get $900 million. But we spent but then we spend $1.5 billion in subsidies, the same corporations. So it's like, what are we actually getting?
You're so smart.
Right. So yeah. So we could be doing something better, right? So for instance, domestic. You're talking about manufacturing. Okay. Why is energy expensive in Australia? Well, because companies who want to use gas here are paying through the nose. It's cheaper to buy gas from Japan than it is to actually buy gas from Australia, and Japan gets the gas from Australia, right?
And why is that? Like what?
Well, because we've got shitty contracts that was signed up, right? And also the government can pull the pin. They got a lever they could pull straight away, but they refuse to pull it, where they could actually allow a certain percentage of gas to be sold for a local Australian. But there is no currently limit at the moment.
So is the argument if we had cheaper energy, we'd have more manufacturing?
Yeah, partially, yes. Because the energy is so expensive in Australia, right? Yeah. So, but there's other reasons, yeah.
Well, now, Oliver, you have to rebut the rest. So China, manufacturing, all that stuff.
I think like there's useful points from both sides. I don't think they were necessarily disagreeing. I think they were complementing from what I heard.
You're sitting on the fence, yes.
Oh, well, I think.
Oh, come on.
I think that what Stefan said about the lack of raw value creation via manufacturing being detrimental to the economy in the long term, I think is absolutely correct, especially when you end up in wartime scenarios.
Yep.
I think that the need for us to have cheaper energy to promote manufacturing, I think is a need as well. I think, effectively, like that. In summary, there's decisions that have been made over the last 100 years which were economically beneficial in the short term, which has have led to long-term issues, and now it's like some of those have to be wound back.
It's probably decisions in the last 30 years as part of outsourcing, destruction of the manufacturing base.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to have to try and... Okay, so I think Well, we've got the first thing with China is I'm going to try and I don't know, counter your points. So you've got goodbye, Peter. Peter's going. All right. So China. So China's population is aging, I believe.
Yep.
So they've got more elderly people. So that's going to place a lot of weight. And they've got India, who's got a relatively young population, and they are going to overtake China, what, next year or the year after? That's one. Two, AI automation could possibly render the cheap labor of China obsolete.
Okay, let me rebut all three of those points.
I made 3 points.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You made 3 points. The first one was you're talking about the aging population of China. So China's strategy against that is twofold. One is Belt and Road Initiative, because it will use Africa as a source of cheap labour and a consumer market for when its consumer market dries up. The second point is that through robotic automation, it will take the Japanese approach, whereby it substitutes labour with robotics. The second point you made on India, yes, India has growth, but if you look at India's GDP growth over the last 50 years, it's been just getting absolutely dominated by China. And the reason is, my personal view, which is probably a bit controversial, is it's cultural. Like, China is a place where people don't talk much and they get a lot done. India is a place where there's a lot of talk and not much actual action in terms of actually doing things. I don't know, like, that's maybe that's a bit, but I think there's some cultural kind of issues around them being able to actually properly industrialize or challenge China in any way. And then the third point, what was your third point? You had a third point. I forgot.
Oh, robots.
Yeah.
Automation. That was my third point.
Yeah, I guess robots automation would be how I'd see. You're saying it's going to counter China's low-cost model on
Okay.
labour, but
Yep.
China
Well,
doesn't have a low-cost model for labour. That
the
it
yuan.
used to.
The yuan is buried in the ground. Like they lower their yuan, but like deliberately to keep their labor costs to the world really low.
Yeah, but their labour costs are still rising relative to labour costs in other developing countries.
Yeah, that's their
so
problem.
really, right now, their growth is being driven off automation and manufacturing uplift, as opposed to just bringing in cheap labour. So I'd argue, it's provided they continue on the trajectory they are around increasing their manufacturing base, and increasing the automation and the technological capabilities within their manufacturing base, they're not going to be impacted, because they're still going to be cheaper, because it's not going to be based on costs of labour.
Okay, so if there is automation that brings the cost of labor down to zero, pretty much, that means that the cheapest way to manufacture something would be locally and just in time. So if you're in America and you want stuff made, you make it right there with
Yeah,
the robots.
that's a fair.
Yep.
That is a fair argument. Yep.
Second thing is China's really on the back pedal at the moment, because they need to be on top of this AI thing. They know it, and they're making great strides, because they don't really have as much ethical judicial red tape as the West, and they've already got, I don't know, some sort of LLM doppelganger for every citizen or something like that. They're taking a lot of potentially risks, but they could possibly leapfrog the West. And also, I'm making your points, by the way. But and also, what was the third thing? So as far as weapons, I mean, America still has and will have for the next decade at least the greatest war machine on the planet.
It could arguably, it's a bit of a paper tiger, depending on who you talk to.
Well, they make sure that they are in a war every decade to make sure that they know how to roll out and project force. And
Well, it's not working out for them in Ukraine right now.
yeah, well, they've got Russia to deal with, so can't really do much with that many nukes. But I don't know. But yeah, if I mean, I don't know if I should mention the Monroe Doctrine. Should I mention the Monroe Doctrine?
Monroe, no adversaries in
Yes.
the Western Hemisphere.
Yes, so, and just to spell it out for everyone listening, so the Monroe Doctrine is that the US will not tolerate any peer competitors. So if there is a peer competitor, they will challenge them. And when you are talking about the longevity of your nation, you should not allow any other nation to rise to your level ever.
I think Monroe Doctrine is actually just they won't allow a competitor within the Western Hemisphere, which is like North and South America. But,
Yes, but
at the same time, they do try and prevent peer competitors, yes.
they're actively preventing China
Yep.
right now
Oh,
because
yeah.
they don't want China to be a peer competitor in that region. And that's AUKUS, that's the thing with Japan, that's
Yeah.
the pivot to Russia. It's like,
Yeah.
so they want to contain China. And
A new Cold War.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
And we're siding, Australia's siding with the US because there's no real option to side with China because apparently if you are a regional hegemony, you treat your neighbors like crap. So you ask, Venezuela or Mexico how they get treated by the US. The US just comes in and does whatever they want.
Yeah, look, I think there's a few reasons. One is like America controls the sea lanes, so Australian trade is dependent on the United States. Second is like historical ties, right? Like Anglosphere ties,
Yes.
Five Eyes intelligence alliance. And third, I think it's just Australia is heavily, influenced by, the multilateral organizations that the United States controls, right?
Yeah, if we were beholden to China, they could do anything to us.
Yeah, but we don't have to be beholden to China. We don't have to be beholden to the United States. So we're supposed to be an ally.
Yeah.
So
That's what it is on paper. Yes.
well,
That's right.
There's levels of there's a nuance to this, right? But the Liberals cozied up to the United States and they gave away more than we should have. And the problem is you don't want to be treated like a lackey, right? So you want to be a friend with the United States. You don't want to be their lapdog because you do not get respect that way.
And we chose lapdog. It's like the submarines, right? I forget the former prime minister. I forget his name. He was like, we should have got the diesel submarines. We could have got it before. Would have been enough to defend Australia. Whereas now, what we're doing is we're signing up to buy expensive submarines through the Americans, which aren't meant for defending Australia as a kind of a neutral party. They're meant for containing China. So the whole point of those submarines is to plant them off the coast of China to contain it. So what we're doing is we're adopting
Australia.
Yeah. So Australia is, instead of adopting we'll defend our borders.
Yes.
It's adopting we will contain China.
And there's also 4 new bases, American bases, in the top of Western Australia. That was announced late last year.
Yeah, and all we're doing is sending large amounts of money to pay the United States for their own military. So we're not. We could have done a lot of things with our military here, which would have allowed us. Well, my point is, do your military and make it dual purpose, right? So
Yes. Well, they've. I think there was something 400, Army 400 initiative where they've reduced that from 400. Military infantry fighting vehicles down to 200, something like that, 250, and now they're now concentrating on air and sea. Obviously, for the
I think the other thing is just sending all the money to the American military-industrial complex. It's incredibly inefficient. I mean, it's just kind of kind of how it works is they lobby the politicians. The U.S. Congress. U.S. Congress just passes whatever laws give more money to the military-industrial complex. And it's this cyclical process, but it's not necessarily very efficient at manufacturing military technology.
Lockheed, Boeing. But there is an upside though. For example, with the sea lanes, like China violated some sea lane things recently, and it was in Australian waters, and we did not enforce those. Because you don't want to enforce some sea lane issue with China. But America said, don't worry about it, we'll enforce it. So there is a level of, what do you call it?
Cooperation.
It's like not like you're passing the buck. You're kind of like,
Symbiotic.
Yeah, no, I get it, but like,
they're taking the brunt of the flack.
yeah.
You know, even though we're supposed to have enforced that, they said, don't worry, don't enforce it.
So what was China trying to do on the sea lanes? Trade with Australia? Like what else does it actually do?
I'm not sure on it, but it was during. It was recently brought. It made the headlines just recently, and it was about something. China violated something in the sea.
It just sounds like China bad propaganda to me.
Yeah. It's China like poking at whatever.
Maybe.
No, they do it. They do it all the time. So every military does this. Basically, they try to get away with as much as they can, especially with international waters. You try to see how far you can get into the other country's waters. Now, the thing is, if you don't get pushed back, right? If there's no one contests it, then you sort of get away with it, and so they basically get more and more ambitious, right? So you get more and more. So this is. It's very, very important when you run these freedom of navigation exercises and all stuff. You do that because the second you don't, then it becomes a status quo, right? That they will just take an inch and take another inch and take another inch.
You mean like what America's doing off the coast of China right now?
Yes,
It's
because
both.
of the containment issue with China's expansion and also Taiwan.
Look, it's all militaries do it, right?
Yeah.
Right. But the thing is, we've gone down these submarines. They're very, very expensive.
We don't get them for 20 years, and there's like 5 of them or something.
Correct. We don't get them. So what are you going to do for the next 20 years? So we really should have, and my military idea is that we should have built stuff here. Now, it may not have been very good. It may have been, not great, but we would have had decent manufacturing ability. You would have actually generated your capability.
Well,
Because
it goes back to that point about
Yeah.
revitalizing manufacturing, right?
Correct, because we don't have manufacturing here in Australia.
It's a bootstrap for manufacturing.
Correct, right? And so if you can build the warships and you can build merchant ships and you can build other things in Australia.
And to your point about localized production, right? If that's the future, then
Yeah, perhaps in the future there will be like different types of manufacturing, like with 3D printing type manufacturing, like how some people are manufacturing rockets with that sort of thing. And so we could possibly build up that sort of manufacturing base in the new style.
as opposed to just being kind of a vessel with like no
Yeah,
manufacturing.
I think we use Bay Systems in Britain. That's the shipyard, I think, that does a lot of the refitting of the submarines. If that's can't remember, they refitted the landing, what is it? The Canberra and the our 2 landing helicopter decks. That was originally Spanish, I think. Spanish landing helicopter carriers, and they got refitted by Bay Systems in Britain to Australian spec. And then they tried to land the F-35 on it. No, it's not gonna happen. It'll burn the deck. But then they said, "Oh, let's just change the material on the deck to withstand the F-35's engines." And there's another $3 billion down the drain.
Yeah, I don't know. Aircraft carriers are just kind of walking coffins, from what I understand. They're good at projecting power to against small nations, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So you guys were talking about before just international waters, right? And I'm going a bit off topic, but on the moon, right? That's considered like you can't own it, but America obviously will think that they do. So international waters, you were talking about testing boundaries, yeah?
So there's like I can't remember. There's a certain you have an exclusive economic zone, but then you have territorial waters, and it's set by a number of kilometers. But it's by convention. For example, like the laws of the sea or whatever.
It's 100
America isn't even a signatory. So it goes around saying it's enforcing the laws of the sea that it hasn't actually,
Yeah.
that it's not even
So-
a signatory of. So
Yes.
it's just by convention.
Yeah, so America sets a lot of the treaties and laws, and
But they don't apply to them
Yeah,
necessarily.
they expect every other country to follow them, but then they will just break it whenever it
They feel
suits
like it,
them.
yeah.
And they've had more violations than any other nation, but no one's going to.
So really with the moon, it's just whoever's strongest, right? They get the moon.
Yeah.
And whoever can get there.
Yeah.
Because a few people have. It's just interesting,
India.
with the international waters, there's different laws, their own
Isn't it-
laws.
it's like
but
a
then up there, you can't just take ownership of it.
It's like
Do
100.
you know what I mean?
Is it 100 miles or 100 kilometers along the coast? That's your local waters. Something
Yeah,
like
I'm not sure exactly. I think it's to do with the continental shelf and things like that.
that. Oh, right. Okay.
So what about America has been trying to block technological transfer to China and try to block off all the chips or whatever. And then suddenly
yes.
China had 7 nanometer chips, and it
Well,
freaked
yes.
everyone out.
So there's 2 types of lithography. There's deep, something like I can't remember the terms, but there's one that's like at 130 nanometers, and there's another one at like 5 nanometers. And TSMC has the 130, or it sounds really, really, really big. But what they do is it's like using a giant texter and using the corner of it to like scrape stuff on. And so you have to do it multiple times and kind of mask the rest of the texter so that only the corner of it gets on the thing. So multiple exposures, and you can somehow get it down to like 15 nanometer or something.
Okay, I'm lost, but so China's been making pretty good progress. Right?
China's got
China's got the deep one, like the ultra extreme deep. Sorry, go.
Yeah, China's got the previous technology, right?
No, they have the latest one.
No, they have the previous one, right?
Okay.
There's a company in Norway that makes I can't remember the name. That's EUV, right?
Yes.
Extreme ultraviolet.
Extreme
That's what TSMC's has. China's not allowed to have it. Right? They've got the old technology. However, you can build enhanced nodes using the old style. You just have to run more patterns, multi-pattern modes, right? So you basically run a number of iterations, and each iteration you do, you're basically getting fine details, but you have to run a number of passes, which makes it more expensive. And the lines it can create are slightly fuzzy, which means you get more defects. So you can do it, it's just more expensive, that's all, right? Now the EUV, you can get much finer details. The wafers are more expensive, right? But you can pump more out and you get more finer details. You can make better chips.
Right. So are the Chinese getting better at actual innovation in this area or not?
I
Really?
know other companies have done it, but China has to. It's necessary for them to do it, where the other companies is like it's expensive. China's forced to do it, so they were forced to innovate. So they have got something that's good. It's not quite as good as you can't make 3 nanometer chips, right? But
Is this it?
yeah,
China's chip making.
Correct.
Too good to
Correct.
be true.
yeah.
Wasn't there a shortage recently of all chips for all electronics?
Yeah, there's been a shortage
there for a
everywhere. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
All the global supply chains were all affected and things like that. So
But so is China? I'm guessing China's trying to, because there's always been this. I've always heard this myth that China can't innovate; it can only copy. There was the same myth for all of the Asian tigers, right? Like starting from Japan, going all the way down. But so are they? I'm assuming they're trying to innovate, right? Like they're going to try and.
of course they do. They've got more engineers than the population of Australia.
Yeah.
So
they have 2 things now. They have 2 things. They've got the that manufacturing base that we were talking about, and also they have this new Wi-Fi standard that blows away what we've got at the moment. It's got latency of 20 1,000th of a second. So this is like
0.2 milliseconds. Less.
Less.
0.02 milliseconds
like
or something.
like I can't.
It's just, they basically rolled out 5G everywhere, right?
I think it's on par with 5G or faster than 5G.
Oh, it was 5G.
Are you talking about latency or throughput?
It's not called. It's no. Throughput is around 900 megabit per second over short range.
That's not bad.
It's around 50 meters.
Yeah, it's
50 meters.
Very small latency as well. But you need more towers. That's all.
Oh, yeah, because of the high frequency. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. But it's good. I mean, look, a lot of people make this argument that China can't innovate, but every country that was behind technologically copied first, reverse engineered, and then from that
Became a leader.
became a leader because you have to catch up. So it's not possible for any country to catch up by themselves from starting from zero. They have to grab some base to be able to have the same level as someone else, right? And so they did all the things. They reverse engineered, they stole stuff, they copied stuff, they bought stuff, they developed their own stuff, right?
Yeah.
But they're way beyond the argument that people now use to basically put China in a bad light by saying they copy everything. Maybe they did, but they don't anymore because they've got lots of engineers. A lot of the scientists in AI, if you look at them, they're all Chinese. They're all Chinese scientists at the top of their field, right? So I don't look at it as a bad thing. I think it's good. I mean, the more scientists we have in the world, the better, the faster we solve the world's problems. We don't solve the world's problems by using the technology that caused them. We use new technology to solve those problems.
Okay. So here's a question then. So China's kind of on the up. And then, so people talk about it, they call it the Ulysses trap or something. And that was like a rivalry between Sparta and Athens that led to war. Like Athens was on the rise, Sparta was against it, and there was the Peloponnesian Wars. And it was very bad for everything. And it was all about one power rising, one power falling. Or you could say the same with the rise of Germany before World War One, with the British kind of not being massive fans, right? So then what would you guys see as the likely scenarios given China is rising and America wants to contain it? Like, are we going to head back to a new Cold War where we've got two rival trade camps, where you've got a BRICS, Russia, China versus the West? Or are we going to have a hot war? Or are we going to have, or it's all going to dissipate and everyone will be friends again, soon?
I'm hoping we don't have any war, actually.
Well, I mean, I would hope that we all just be friends, right? But it's just, arguably, that's just not how the world works.
Well, we got to solve the problems that create war in the first place. And one of those is energy.
Oh, right.
Right.
So the reasons are resources or political
Control.
Control.
It's like laws of the international, geopolitics is laws of the jungle. It's like if you're bigger than someone else.
Yeah. And usually there's a scapegoat. Oh, it's religion. Oh, it's something else.
Yeah.
So you've got a country like Indonesia that's got multiple different religions, and they are fine.
Yeah.
Because there's no resources to divvy up and no other issues.
Yeah, well, that's kind of more like the casus belli for the conflict, right? Like, it's like, it's religion or, it's human rights and democracy.
Yeah.
So, like, but meanwhile, America will be allying up with Vietnam, which is communist, or Saudi Arabia, which is, MBS, right? Which just shows that that's all kind of hypocrisy.
Yeah. Well, they just want to have a proxy war with Russia.
Well, yeah, and China.
Yeah, but what?
Cold War
Yeah,
with
China, yeah.
But what's the point?
To
Fire
keep
them off.
to sell weapons.
Political primacy as well as like selling weapons to your allies.
Yeah, but again, what's the point? So you got to look.
I think it's
war
like
is
it's
big
hierarchy. Like, so if
Sorry?
you think about a
Yeah.
tribal society, you're going to have, like, in a tribal society, you're going to have like a status hierarchy, right? And then someone's at the top of the status hierarchy, and then someone could challenge someone further up the status hierarchy, and there's conflict.
Yeah, but for what end? So
It's like a social control.
no, but okay. So these are on the other side of the world. So that you're not. It's not like you're butting up heads against a neighbour. These are.
It's just who sets the rules, right?
No, I know that, but there's obviously some underlying cause. So one of the reasons that most people give wars why America's in so many problems is the fact that oil, gas, etc. Right? So resources.
It's just power, pure power.
Well, it is, but it's that's one of your causes, right? So if Saudi Arabia wants to cut your energy off, then you might be a little bit upset by that, and therefore you want to stabilise.
Therefore, you overthrow MBS and
All that sort of stuff, right? But if we get rid of the shortage of resources, and we can't get rid of all shortage of resources, but we can get rid of some, we can reduce that leverage, and therefore the reasons for conflict.
Yeah, but I think you
can't eliminate them, but we can reduce them.
You can reduce the influence resource control has.
Correct.
But overall, just simply control, is still something that people are going to fight over, irrespective
So
of resource
basically,
control.
you could say, is there a limit to human greed? Would that be a way to phrase it? Would that
I think
answer
it's just
it?
political control.
But that would be an extension of human greed,
Yeah,
would
but-
it not?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like you have a society, you have a set of laws and whatever for a society. It's a system of control.
What I mean is, we don't fight over air. It's everywhere. But on Mars, we probably would. Total recall.
Because it's what you
So,
said before, rare
Scarcity.
commodity or something.
So if we make everything practically abundant, what are we going to fight over? And that would be, if we are so greedy that we would still fight over it, that would be on us.
Well, and that was the point I'm making, right? So we should be chasing this elimination of scarcity as much as possible. Now, it's not going to stop people from killing each other and all this other stuff, right? Because there's still going to be people who want to have power over other people. It will just lessen the likelihood of conflict.
So the argument is, to avoid a Cold War trading bloc rivalry, we need to remove resource scarcity.
Correct.
Or possibly align ourselves with the other side.
Well, you don't see Australia going and attacking everyone overtly, right?
Like
Because
alien
there's no
invasion.
point.
If we got invaded by aliens, we'd all be on the same side.
Sure.
It's a Hollywood trope.
Now they'd flip someone, divide and conquer.
Yeah.
They'd flip. I don't know. Who would they flip?
The Filipinos.
Yeah.
Why are you flicking at me?
They're too friendly. They have to go.
They'd ally up with someone, yeah.
Well,
Maybe they already have.
Mm-hmm.
so I think we've arrived at a nice end point.
Cool.
That abundance may be the key to a flourishing future, as long as we're not too greedy.
Yeah, and let's just hope we don't
Blow ourselves up.
blow ourselves up before then.
True.
True.
But you know how you were talking before about war, how it's technically all bad, and I agree, it is.
It's good for
But
technological
there's a lot of
improvement.
innovation
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
necessity, because
Yes.
aeroplanes evolved massively. Missiles
Yes.
were
So
made.
most technology is sponsored by, say, DARPA and the military-industrial complex. So,
Yes.
the first procurers of any new technology is the state, and the first procurers within the state is the military. So whether it's the internet, the computer, all of these inventions are generally start off as military projects. So you're right, there is a
Yeah.
lot of benefits. But I would just argue that I get that, but
Well,
I don't
wouldn't say
think
benefit, but like,
no,
yeah,
it's real benefit. It's
necessity
investment
for
in technology because you're scared of war or whatever.
Yeah.
What I'd be arguing though is that, to Brendan's point, I don't think the current consolidation of military-industrial manufacturing within the four companies in America, Raytheon, Boeing, whatever, is the most efficient way.
Oh, it's so inefficient. My gosh.
It's incredibly inefficient. If you distributed that, so like in economic terms, it's more near perfect competition as opposed to an oligarchy, right? Then
Oligopoly. Yes.
but yeah, whatever the word is.
Yeah.
Then you'd get much better outcomes,
Yes.
right?
But they're basically it's basically a cash grab, and they know it.
Highly inefficient cash grab.
Yeah, but they don't care about the inefficiency. They just care about getting the government money. And I mean, that's like that everywhere. I mean,
Yep.
I don't want to say.
But then, to your point, if you're neutral and you build local manufacturing for military equipment, that's actually beneficial from a technological perspective as well for countries to do.
Yeah, and that same with farming, just-in-time farming. If we grow the produce right here, we don't have to transport it. If we make the fuel here, we don't have to transport it. Same with electricity generated locally, and yeah, just do everything local.
Yep, and the argument being that these big MIC companies in America are really inefficient.
Yes. Well, in other words, there's so much we can improve. There's so much low-hanging fruit.
The $17,000 tow bar.
Is that like with the contract, US
Yeah.
Army contracts?
That's right. I think it was AOC or there's another famous lady, which I can't remember, who was talking about it, and they were literally talking about some military component, and it had a huge markup on it, and it's literally exactly the same as everything else, but because it's sold to the military, it's very expensive, and it was like literally something like about $17,000 for a tow bar.
It's like the Apple TV stand or something. I can't remember what it was, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know the military can be dual use too. So
Yeah.
So for instance, we've got a big problem in Australia with our military is the fact that we don't have enough sailors in our ships, right?
Really? They're changing that now. They're putting more. They cut 50 billion out of Army to put into Navy and Air Force.
Yeah. Well, okay. So what's your Navy ships doing around when they're out floating around the water?
They went from doing maritime and peacekeeping. Now the objectives have changed to force projection and containment.
Yeah. Again, it's
China.
it's wasteful, right? So you could use your military while they're floating around the water, do a whole bunch of research while they're doing it.
Or even
fishing.
just building your ships, you're doing the
You know,
Oh yeah.
right? You know, we got climate change and all sort of stuff. We used to have ships that used to go and do those measurements. You could get your warships to do them. We could dual purpose them in peacetime, right? So.
Oh, I see what you mean. So you have a larger fleet that you don't have to keep footing the bill of all the sailors, and you can. So while you're not doing a war thing, you're doing research.
Correct. Yeah.
That's smart.
Because you know you want to train. You got to keep your soldiers and your people trained, right? But while you're floating around, pretty much doing nothing, right, in the water,
Hey.
waiting for some water start or whatever, you could be doing ocean fish search, a whole bunch of other scientific research on this water.
Don't they have like games that they play with other navies?
No, they do,
Something
yeah.
Pack and
That's right,
Yeah,
that's right, yeah.
Rim Pack. That's it.
Yeah. It's something like the drone technology as well. You know, it's very expensive to send ships. We got a very, very large ocean with, huge borders, and we don't have enough ships to do half of it. So we covered that with drones and autonomous warships. You could do all the military things, and you could do all the research things as well.
and do it with local manufacturing.
Yeah.
Local manufacturing is the key.
Yeah.
That's the key.
It's the key because
hold
it
them
creates jobs, but it also allows you to iterate faster. Instead of waiting us to get 20 years to get a single sub, you could be building, even if the quality is not so great the first iteration, you've got a rapid manufacturer, a rapid iteration of these things. We're learning from local, teaching your manufacturers, your soldiers, your Navy, how these works with design, and then you can use that to make our own shipping company. We used to have ships in Australia, local owned ships. Now they're all foreign owned. So you could do this, and then you'd actually have much cheaper and more efficient, transport lanes, military lanes, etc., and also research.
Yeah, I mean, apparently it takes around 7 generations to catch up. And that's assuming you're able to get 10 or 15% better each iteration. By the time you hit around 7 generations, you've caught up to someone who's on the 20th generation. So that's for everything. Shipbuilding, Windows, Microsoft Windows.
China's got a new OS, doesn't it?
Sorry?
China's got its
China,
own
oh
OS.
yeah. Huawei, yeah, they've got I can't remember, but same with cars. So the Japanese were lagging behind the Germans, in the 70s. They caught up in the 80s and 90s. The Koreans started in the 80s, and by the time you hit 2010, they were on par. So now you buy a Korean car, and it's quality. But 20 years ago, it was crap. And 20 years before that, Japanese cars were, well, they called them Jap crap. But now it's like
The high quality.
they're high quality. And it's because they hit every 4 years or something, they made a new generation. 7 times 4, 28, 30 years. So we'll catch up in 30 years, I guess.
Well, if we start now.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah, I think the one good thing we saw, one of the drone technologies from the Predators. I think they were like $30 million a pop. China had one which was about $1 million a pop, and I think it was like 200 kilometers shorter range than the United States one. So it wasn't quite as good, but it was
Cheap.
30 times cheaper, and
Just get,
you know,
just get 30 of them.
yeah, exactly, right. And as you see in Ukraine with the drones, it's like drones everywhere. So sheer numbers can defeat, one single expensive one. So Australia can defend its own shore. We've got a very big ocean between us and any enemies. We've got a big giant radar in the middle of Australia, which can see everything. And so we just have to stop visibility of things by the time they get here. And then, of course, they've got to get past the drop bears and crocs, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wasn't the Japanese famously didn't invade Australia because of the wildlife and the harsh conditions?
Yeah.
They thought, it's not worth it. Stop at Darwin. Something like that. So, yeah, it is a very formidable barrier. The sheer size and harshness of Australia. Also, I think it looks like Mars right in the middle, doesn't it? Yeah, it's red.
Pretty big.
It's literally it's red, and there's almost nothing. I bet you could find a place right in the middle of Australia that's red, and there's no plants. Basically Mars. Anyway.
Probably.
It's like a fun Sunday afternoon activity on Google Earth.
Yeah.
Go on a vision quest.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Oh, my neighbour actually drove across Australia, and he goes out there regularly, and he takes photos, and it's literally just, hundreds of kilometres of nothing.
Yes, indeed.
All right, on that,
Yes.
I think that's it.
Sweet.
Is that the right?
Here
Oh, it's
is
a map.
Australia, and it is red in the middle, like literally.
Yep.
Amazing. Well, thank you for everyone for being here and engaging in this podcast. Thank you, Stefan, for playing devil's advocate many times, and Brendan doing the same, and Oliver for his
Listening skills?
yes and commentary. Thank you. Simmo for his questions. Thank you. See you in the next one.
Thank you.
All right,
Bye.
see ya.
Bye-bye.